So we're going to pick up our tulip again, and we're going to finish it today. We're going to do several things. We're going to work on the background, but we'll save that for last. And then we're going to do the stem and 3 leaves. Now, I'm working digitally. Again, you may well be working with traditional media. So what you do is work with whatever you have, and you're not going to be able to imitate exactly what I'm doing, but come as close as you can. And remember, you can be creative. If you want to do something a little differently, that's okay. I'm just going to show you what I do and give you some tips along the way, particularly if you are working digitally. And so let's just dive in and let's finish this tulip, because we're going to have some real fun the next couple of months. And we're going to begin to explore watercolor, but I'll tell you more about that as we get close to the end of the class. So remember, when you're working in pretty much any kind of representational art like this, you always want to work from the back to the front. Now, the exception I'm making here is I'm not doing the background right now, but that's again because I'm working digitally. I can turn the background on and off, and because I'm working in layers, I can do it anytime. But normally, you would work from back to front. And so normally, if you were going to have a darker background, you would do that first. And the reason is, if you're working in regular physical media, is that if you've already drawn your tulip and all that, then coming in to do a background, it's going to be really tight to come in and avoid drawing over what you've already drawn. So you work from back to front to avoid that problem. But it can be done. It's just a lot more work to draw a background in after you've already drawn your main subject. So that's why you normally work back to front. So our next step, if I look here in terms of where everything is located on this photo and in the drawing, then the stem is the furthest back, even though it would technically be in the center, but it's the furthest item back. And then this leaf over here is going to be next. And then this leaf is going to be next. And then this is our front leaf. This little leaf on the side we're leaving out for compositional reasons. It really doesn't add anything to the picture, so we're not going to draw that. So we're going to start with the stem. Remember, if you're working digitally, then you want to use layers. Those are to your advantage to use. So I'm going to, in fact, I've already created a new layer, and I'm going to come over to my pastel setting. And again, another advantage of digital is you can blow it up a bit, and I'm going to take advantage of that. And let me see how big my mark is here. Oops. Oh, I have the layer locked. I'll explain that later, but I don't want it locked right now. Okay, so there we go. Okay, that's not the color I want, but that's a good mark. I may actually make it a little bit smaller. Okay, so let me take that out. And if I look over here, got kind of a dark green to a medium green to a light green. Remember, the light is coming from this side, so I want to start darker on the left. I'm going to come in here, and I'm actually going to draw over my tulip, and I'm not even going to worry too much about the layers below, because that's one of the advantages of using layers, and I'll show you what I mean here in a minute. I'm not going to worry about getting a little bit on top of the tulip here. I'm going to change that. Let's go with a little lighter now. And just draw that stem in like that. I'm actually going to add a little bit of yellow in just to pick up some of the yellow of that flower. I'm going to blend that. And then we'll go over here to the palette knife tool. Remember, the palette knife tool is your blending tool in Art Rage. And the setting I'm using is Tiny Frost. Okay, so then you may not have that depending on the version you're using, but that's the one that I'm using. I'm going to blow that up just a little bit. And I'm just going to come in quickly and blend. Remember, as you get too close to the edge, it can leave you with too much white, so you want to try to avoid that. And I'm just going to come in and see what I do when I'm doing here. It's pulling that out and turning it white, and I really don't want that. So that's why you kind of stay away from the edges if you can, and leave those a little bit more unblended. Okay. And that's pretty much it. Now, because I'm working with layers, all I have to do is take this, take this, and I can move it down here to underneath all these other layers. And then what was drawn on top of the tulip is now underneath the tulip. So that's why I said I wasn't going to worry about messing that up. And likewise, when I do that front leaf, that layer will be on top. So all of this will disappear too. So I'm going to shrink it down a little bit. We're going to go to our second leaf now. This one here, or not second leaf, it's actually the first leaf. I'm going to add another layer. This is something that you want to remember, not only to add the layer to that, but to actually draw on the right layer. Quite a few times I've been working and I realize I'm not even drawing on the right layer. Okay, let's look over here. We've got kind of a highlight on this side. It's almost a bluish green color. Gets a little darker in the middle. There's a little bit more highlight in the I said in the middle. It gets a little darker coming in, and then there's a little bit more highlight here. A little darker, and then more of a natural kind of a yellowish green on that end. So we're going to start out with our really light green over here. I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. And again, whatever you're using, just follow along. If you're working with pastels, then you'll probably have several different shades of green. So find ones that work for you and go with that. Again, I'm not worrying about these edges here because I'm going to be moving this layer, or I'm going to be putting a layer on top of it. Actually, I'm not going to be moving this one. Okay, I actually have kind of a bluish tone here that I'm going to use because this is going to kind of blend in. So I'm going to do that. Come over here. And again, I'm not trying to make a perfect reproduction. Okay, remember, art isn't necessarily about photographic reality. There are artists that do that, but you don't have to do that. And I am amazed at the artists that do the photographic reality stuff. I mean, that's hard work. And I throw a little yellow in here. That's probably a little bit more than I wanted, but I'm going to just leave it. And then let's go over to the blending tool. I'm going to turn that intensity up a bit on that. So it blends a little faster because I want to try to get through this whole lesson today so we don't have to do a tulip next week, because we are doing watercolors next week. In fact, pretty much all summer, we're going to be learning to work with watercolor. So, and I'm going to be doing some digital stuff like this in the live lessons, and part of that is technical because of how I have to set up to broadcast these. If I use my webcam, unfortunately, everything comes out upside down, and it makes it a little bit more challenging if you're having to draw everything upside down. So it would be upside down for you. It wouldn't be for me. So that's why I do digital more than anything in these live lessons. But I'm also going to record some actual watercolor work, and so you'll get to see both. I want to throw in a little bit more green right here. Let's go back and blend that a little bit more. Okay. Now, right now I'm doing what I would call a base coat. If we have time, I'm going to come back in and add a little bit more refined detail, but it'll just depend on how quickly we get everything else done. I'm trying to think and talk at the same time. Okay. Okay, so that's one leaf. Now, that means I want to add another layer. Okay, so now I've added layer 10, and that is going to be this leaf over here. Okay, so again, we've got really light here and very, well, not very dark, but darker here, and then kind of a very fine highlight on that end. So I'm going to start with the darker chalk in the middle, and I'm calling it chalk because this is the chalk tool. I'm going to blow this up so I can do this a bit faster. And now I'll show you too how I get a little sharper detail there in terms of the point of my leaf, because that's not a very good point. It's kind of a square, and tulip leaf does not look like that. So, and I said you don't have to be, you know, photorealistic, but we do want to, you know, have it somewhat realistic. I'm just tweaking the colors with the color picker over there a little bit. I want to get this a little bit lighter. I really like working with Art Rage for a chalk effect. Art Rage and Procreate both are really good at imitating chalk. Unfortunately, Procreate is only available for the iPad, so if you don't have an iPad, you can't use that, which is why I don't do much here on Procreate, because I want to try to make it as broad as possible. I'm going to make this even darker here. I want as many people as possible to be able to do these if you're trying to do it digitally. Okay, and then I'm going to come back in with my light and add a little bit of highlight there. Okay, now if I want to refine that, actually let me blend first and then I'll show you how to refine it. Okay, so I'm going to come back in. I'm going to make this a bit more intense too, also so I can blend it a little faster and we can get through this whole lesson today. Amazing for me. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and blend this down. Okay. Let's see, again, getting down near the edge there, it's pulling that away. I don't want to do that. I'm going to hit undo a little bit and make this a little bit bigger. There are other settings that I can adjust to get this to do more of what I want, but I'm trying to keep that to a minimum right now. Okay, now if I come back to my pastel, I come in with some of that and just try to get a little bit of the curl here, a little bit of the highlighting in. And again, likewise here. Come back to blend. Have kind of a lighter touch on the blend this time, just really quick. Okay, now I want to make that point better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my eraser tool. And again, in Art Rage, you've got several different settings. I want a hard edge. I don't see a lot of difference between the hard edge and the instant erase, aside from hard edge doesn't take everything off at once. Instant erase does. But for what I want, then I'm going to go with an instant erase. And I'm going to keep it reasonably small so I have good control. And then I'm going to just come in and erase that so that I can get a better point. On my leaf. And if you want to come around the edges and sharpen those too. You can do that. You don't have to. You can leave it rougher, but I like to maybe take a little bit of these strokes out here. Just round the leaf off a little bit more. Okay, so that's our second leaf. Oh, didn't want that. There we go. Okay, now we're going to add another layer, layer 11, and now we're going to do this front leaf. So we look at it, again, we've got a dark area here, got kind of that blue greenish feel here, a little yellow green down here, a little darker here. So let's see what we can do with that. I'm gonna blow this up a little bit. Okay, I'm going to start with my dark. Go back to my pastel tool. I've got it set at 100%, which is probably a little large. Shrink that down. I go with a really dark green, and I'm going to pick it up. Remember, it doesn't matter if I go over other things, because it's going to, the other layers are below it, so it's not going to affect them. Just kind of follow. If you look at a pattern like this, if you squint your eyes, sometimes it's going to give you a little bit better feel just to see the difference between the light and the dark. Now in this case, I drew a line to kind of differentiate where that light and dark are going to separate in this particular picture. Okay, I'm going to go to a lighter green in here. And go to more of, I really don't have a yellow green picked, but come over here with this one. Okay. Now I'm going to get my blue green, or actually I'm going to go with my really light green, and then I'm going to lay some blue, light blue in on top of it. I'm going to do that over here as well. I hope I'm not talking too softly. Sometimes I get engaged with what I'm doing, and then I either forget to talk or I talk really softly, and I don't want to do that. So. Okay, gonna just add a little bit more of that blue here. Aim up here. And okay, so now I'm going to go back to my blender and blend this in, remembering to kind of stay as far away as I can from those edges. And in a second, I'll shape this top up here. Okay, let's see, I come in and blend too much, and what was under that layer has come through. So that can be a problem. But I'm going to just go ahead here and add in a little bit more dark green. Okay. And I got a little bit of white there too. This is, again, this is a problem that's pretty unique to Art Rage, and it can be frustrating at times. There are workarounds like blowing it up and changing the tool way down, but still you have to be really careful to stay away from those edges, or you end up with not a mess, but it's showing through. Okay, see what I'm getting here is I'm getting some show through from the stem, and I don't want that. So I'm going to come back here to my my lighter color, and then throw in a little bit of that blue, and a little bit of the lighter blue, and then try to blend again without getting too close to that stem. Okay, now I want to use my eraser tool and get rid of you'll see my drawing underneath is coming up here. I'm just going to go ahead and make the point over here. I will turn off the drawing layer here very shortly. So, okay, so now, like I said, that's not finished because I would and will come back in and add finer detail, but I want us to do the background, and then with whatever time we have left, we'll do the finer detail. So I'm going to go all the way down to layer number 3 at the bottom and turn the background back on. So I've got this nice dark rich chocolate brown, but I want to get this kind of a feel of straw and hay or whatever that is. I guess that's mulch, maybe pine mulch or something. I don't want to draw every individual little bit of it for a couple of reasons. One, it would be distracting because our focus is pretty much on the tulip, and anytime you add extra detail, that detail is going to pull the eye away. So I really don't want all of that detail, but I do want something other than just a flat brown here. So I'm going to come back to my pastel tool. I'm going to shrink it down. I'm going to go to my browns. Now I'm drawing on layer 3, or the bottom layer, and I'm going to just take, let me see how big that is. Yeah, it's about right. I'm going to just take my brown tool and whoops. Okay, mistake. I should have a red light flashing. I am drawing on layer 11, which is why it's drawing on these leaves. So there's a good illustration. Always be aware of what layers you're drawing on. Okay, and take that back out. I'm going to click on layer 3. Now, as I draw, I can draw pretty much anywhere I want to, and it's not going to be a problem. And I'm just going to make marks. I'm going to actually bring that up even higher. Now I'm drawing on top of chalk that I've already put in there. So you notice how I get those marks. The way to avoid that if you're doing digital is just don't take your stylus off the paper. Okay, so I'm going to just make some crazy marks. I'm going to go in for another color of brown here. Let's see if I get something maybe richer, darker. Those are all kind of blending together. So let me see. Get my color picker. That's the little eyedropper tool. Let me get over here. Okay, that's kind of a gray tone. And again, I'm just going to draw in a bunch of X's. Like this. And I'm actually going to come up here. I'm going to just click in this one, and I'm going to move it down, make it a little bit darker. Okay, let's come back. And even throw some black in here. And add some of that shadowing in. Okay, then I'm going to go back to my blender. I'm going to take that up pretty high. I'm just going to soften that, blur it out a bit. So again, I don't have a lot of detail pulling on your eye and taking your eye away from the tulip. Now, if I want to add an accent or two in, that's okay. I might, actually what I would probably do is add another layer on top of layer 3. It's numbered layer 12. But then, ooh, that's way too big. I don't want that. Let's hit undo. Shrink that way, 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 way down. And that's pretty bright. I don't think I like that. I could try blending it and softening it out. And there would be ways to play with that. I'm not going to do too much with that just because of the time limitation, because we're almost out of time. And I do want to, let me go back to layer 3 here and finish softening this little bit. I do want to show you how I would add finer detail here. Okay, remember we've drawn all of these layers. Okay, now this isn't specifically a lesson on digital work, so I'm not going to go into merging layers and all of that. But if I wanted to, say, come over to this leaf and add in more detail, there are a number of ways I can do it. But one way is by locking transparency. And what that means is I'm on this layer. It's only going to let me draw on areas in this layer that have already been painted. Remember, if I turn off all these other layers, then all you would see is a white background with this one leaf. So the white background is what's called transparency. These are pixels that haven't been drawn on. This one has. So I could come in and begin to refine, like with my airbrush tool. Let's go over to airbrush. See what preset it's on. Let's go with the slow flow tinter. Let's say I wanted to add in a little bit more of this kind of blue, but I wanted a little bit more control. I'm going to shrink it down. And then I could begin, make sure I'm actually on there. I am drawing on it. Okay, I'm going to try a different color just so you can see it better. Okay. Not working right. Let me see. There it is. Okay. I'm going to brighten this up and go with that blue. Oh, that's not the one I wanted either. All right. Well, then I will do something a little bit more obvious. Let's go back to my pastel tool. And I'm going to go with that blue. I don't use the airbrush much, so I'm not as familiar with the settings. So let's say I wanted to do this highlighted edge. Oh, let me make that larger. There we go. Actually, I want that brighter. There we go. Okay. And because transparency is locked, I can actually come in and draw right on that edge and add in the highlights. And it's not going to let me draw out here. It's going to only let me draw right where I want it. So I can come in and I can add that in. I can add in maybe a little, a little shadowing back here. Get a little bit more differentiation in with the leaves, a little bit more separation. Okay, so I'm goofing around right now, and I'm out of time. So just because I don't like to leave things unfinished, I'm going to blend that. Just hit that carefully with the blender. The same here where I put the shadowing in. And again, if I were doing a finished picture here, I would go in and be adding a lot more detail here, up in the leaves, and things like that, because that's my style of art. I like to add detail in. So anyway, that is our tulip. I hope you've had fun with this. I am out of time, and I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. I'm Jim Pence with See the Light.